Warning, this video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. I do not condone or recommend the usage of illicit drugs, and I especially do not recommend using Diphenhydramine or Benadryl as it is commonly referred to in anything larger than a medical dose. Usage of Diphenhydramine outside of that threshold can lead to serious health complications including seizures or even death. With that said, please enjoy the trip report. Hello everyone, and today we are going to be finishing our two-part series recalling Sedric Lightbury's two famous trip reports, his 1,800 mg and 2,000 mg DPH trips. In this episode, we will be covering his final trip report of 2,000 mg. He posted these trip reports live to 420 Chan's Deliriant board back in 2010, and luckily they have been preserved as text files on paste bin, otherwise, they may have ended up being completely forgotten about. If you have not seen part 1, I highly recommend you watch it as well since it is extremely interesting. With that said, let's get into the trip report. I went to hell and back to be able to tell you this. 2 grams. Don't do it. Just don't, unless you want to end up in the hospital, while being threatened by your inner demons and feeling almost unbearable pain in your chest, thinking you could die any second. Still dealing with minor weakness, but it probably won't go away for a while. After around 20 minutes of consuming the pills, I started to see mild distortions and auditory hallucinations, mostly ticking and scratching, which seemed distant. I was inside the car which was going to the house I was supposed to spend my trip at, and I kept telling Martin, my friend, not to interfere with the trip in any way, unless it was obvious I'm in lethal danger. I noticed my memory span was becoming short, and the ticking and scratching was getting louder, along with a mild headrush-like, high-pitched sound. Right before we reached his place, I realized I couldn't move and my vision started glitching up. It kept flashing and freezing, and sometimes I wouldn't see anything at all for a split second. I told this to Martin, and he convinced me I could walk, just had to do it carefully, so I followed him to the house. I was very heavy, and every time I looked at the floor, it seemed like my feet were sinking into it. I was left alone in the room, which was slowly melting, and most of the furniture had bright, unusual outlines. At this point, I felt crawling all over me. Vision flashed again, and I found myself completely covered in spider webs. Moving my hands through them helped for a little while. Hands would go through them and they'd fade, but the webs came back almost immediately. I could feel the sticky sensation on my skin, which made them seem just as real as I was. Then, there was a loud knock at the window. I turned around to see someone standing behind it, so I opened it. I heard music coming from outside. It was different from what I heard during my last trip, but strangely familiar and similar to it. "Let's go," Sedric said to the creature, and I climbed out the window without much consideration. It was extremely hard to walk. The grass and the trees seemed grainy and it looked like they were moving, crawling, breathing and living. My sense of time was severely distorted. A few steps would feel like an eternity, or I would black out and confuse fairly long periods of time for a second. We were going towards the music, the creature walking a few steps ahead of me. After a while, I started noticing lights, probably torches, among trees, and hundreds of moths around them. The air was full of moths, and they would land on me and fly around. I tried my best to keep them out of my face, failing miserably. Finally, we reached a clearing. There were many people there. At the front, very still, stood my relatives, all dressed in black, surrounded by shadows and people I don't know. They all seemed frozen and had the same blank expression on their faces, eyes fixed on me. I tried to talk, but my voice got stuck in my throat as it was extremely sore and dry. I started feeling a mixture of guilt and fear, because I could tell they all knew the creature took me here because of DPH, and considering most of them were dead, I wasn't sure if I was still alive. Suddenly, there was a very unpleasant crackling sound and a white flash. The creature who took me here was gone now, and everyone was just walking around and talking, completely ignoring me. I decided to sit because of the heaviness. After a while, I noticed a black dot moving through the grass towards me very quickly with the corner of my eye. Then, I would feel a bulge moving under my shirt at the right shoulder. I freaked out and smacked it, and a black rat fell out my sleeve. It looked dead, but every time I took my attention off it, it would disappear and run or hide under my shirt again. I was really scared of it for some reason, and after around 5 loops of this, I started beating it repeatedly after it dropped out of my sleeve, until the rat's body turned into some sort of rubber goo. Its legs were still moving. After this, it wouldn't touch me again, but I kept seeing its distorted body with the trembling legs from time to time. I quickly stood up and went to a different spot. I was approached by my mother. She was crying. "Why did you do this, Sedric? We warned you." I told her not to worry, and that I was going to be fine. Bullshit. Other people froze again, and I could hear voices saying, "We warned you, and what have you done?" even though their lips weren't moving. The longer I looked at them, the more distorted they would get, until they had bug eyes and arms reaching the ground. Another flash followed. I was back at the front yard of the house, and saw Martin standing by me. I assumed he shook me. He asked if I was alright, and that I've been standing here for ages. He had spiders in his hair. I tried to say yes, but I couldn't because my mouth was painfully dry. I walked my way to the house. Martin told me I never went there in the first place. The whole trip thus far has been experienced right after getting out of the car, standing and moving around at that spot. There are many blackouts at this point. I recall centipedes from my last trip, spiders, all over me, and inside me. Around 10 of them crawled out of my mouth. July 13th, the next day I woke up, still tripping hard. Never remembered falling asleep. I went to check the next room. Martin told me I was out for around 5 hours. Later, I found out he was still asleep, and the information was false. I managed to get some water, and go to the bathroom, because the urge to pee was terrible. Moving was still a difficult task, and I couldn't concentrate properly. This is when I posted a live with 2 A's. When I got back to the living room, I saw someone sitting on the couch. It stood up, and I recognized the figure as the Hat Man. He walked towards me and said, "You are getting in," and running out. I started to feel extremely hazy and got another head rush. I'm not sure if I left the sofa, or blacked out and laid down on it, but I was there, at the edge of sleep, and the Hat Man was looking right at me. This might be a dream, or a full-blown trip. I don't remember closing my eyes, and I could still feel my surroundings. I was in an extremely vast room. The floor, ceiling and walls were black. There were no doors and I couldn't see where it ended because darkness hid it out of sight. There was a woman standing right in front of me. She looked at me, smiled, and took her face off as if it was a mask. The face behind it looked exactly the same, but she was bleeding from her eyes, mouth and nose, and her eyes were completely black. I looked around the room, to see faces appearing on the walls and ceiling, greeting me without words, until they started to fall down like masks too, revealing bruised and blood-covered faces. The masks would turn into ash that wouldn't settle, but move around the floor and feet. That's all I can remember from this stage of the trip. After snapping out of this, I laid there for a while, feeling my heart beat rapidly. The Hat Man was gone. My hallucinations were mostly auditory now. I heard lots of incomprehensible whispers, and quiet singing. I posted on this thread again, and decided to go to sleep for real. I was so very tired. This time, I drifted into deep sleep. After a while, I realized I was sleeping. My vision was completely black, until a room began to appear. It was small and gray, its door open, displaying nothingness. I walked towards the door and stepped out of the room. Several shadows approached me. The door shut, and I heard "You were out" very clearly. Then I felt a burning pain in my chest. Martin said I started screaming. He tried to wake me up and checked my pulse, then realized what was happening. I was having a seizure. He called an ambulance. I had to down a lot of charcoal. Minor hallucinations for around 3 days. Fuck. That is Sedric Lightbury's final trip report, and again I must say that this video is not meant to glorify his actions. Please, and I truly mean please, do not try to replicate this. And if you watch these videos or you're a fan of the channel, but do not use DPH, I am begging you not to start using it. Sedric Lightbury's current whereabouts are unknown. I did some digging across the internet and some people vaguely remember posts saying he had passed away many years ago. I assume that is the case considering it has been 13 years and we have heard nothing from him. I personally believe he eventually tried an even larger dose of DPH which took his life, but this cannot be confirmed nor denied. Either way, it is a sad story and I hope he was able to quit DPH and never look back. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. This is Pills Am I Right signing off, till next time.